If you think that only today we treat dogs as members of the family, it is because you have not yet heard what it was like in ancient Rome. There, these animals were more than just companions. They were real partners in everything. The Romans used dogs as hunters, guardians of houses, protectors of livestock, and also as inseparable friends in everyday life. But this special bond went even further. In times of war, they knew that relying on the strength, smell, and courage of these animals could be the difference between life and death. The dog wasn't just the animal that barked at the gate. He was an active part of society, respected and valued as a true warrior. Wait a minute. Before I continue, I need your help. YouTube only releases this video to more people if it has a lot of interaction. That is, without your comment, this knowledge can be buried and never reach those who need it. If this content makes sense to you, comment If you disagree, comment 0 and tell me why. I want to see at least 100 comments here for YouTube to understand that this subject needs to be spread. Then comment now and be part of this mission to reveal the secrets of ancient Rome. Now let me tell you where this famous war dog of the Romans, the Canis Pugnax, came from. It didn't come out of nowhere. In fact, its history begins long before Rome was the power we know. It all started with an ancient breed called the Molosser, bred in Greece. Imagine huge dogs with thick hair, muscular bodies, and a courage that frightened even the largest predators. These Molossers were used to protect herds of cattle, guard horses, and in some regions, even to hunt dangerous animals. They weren't just big, they were smart, fierce when they needed to be, but also loyal to their owners. Over time, the Molosso spread, being crossed with other dogs in different regions, and ended up giving rise to several breeds that carried its characteristics of strength, endurance, and bravery. This whole process generated 3 great families of dogs: the Molossians, the dogs, and the Martins. Each of these families ended up influencing dozens of different races. Rome, smart as it was, soon realized the value of these animals. They didn't just admire from afar, they began to create their own lines of war dogs, taking advantage of the best qualities that these ancient Molossers had. That's when Canis Pugnax was born, a breed tailor-made to face the challenges of war. Strong, resistant, imposing, and obedient. A true 4-legged soldier. And think of a difficult time. Life was full of dangers, bandits, invasions, conflicts, of all kinds. And having a strong dog by your side was a huge advantage, both to protect the house and to secure yourself in military campaigns. Canis Pugnax was born precisely from this spirit of survival and adaptation that has shaped the entire history of Rome. As Rome began to grow and conquer land, one thing became very clear. They weren't just taking soldiers into battle. They were absorbing the best in each people they encountered, and guess what? The use of dogs in warfare was one of those ideas that they did not let go. People such as the Greeks, Germans, Gauls, and many others were already using dogs in combat long before the Romans thought about it. These peoples had realized that a good dog could be as deadly as a well-trained warrior. Imagine being on a battlefield facing armed soldiers and suddenly being attacked by a giant, fast, and ferocious dog. The psychological impact was devastating. Rome, in the beginning, was even slow to adopt this practice. They already bred dogs for hunting and guarding, but the idea of using these animals as a strategic part of the war took a while to mature. But one thing we learned by looking at Roman history, when they realized that something worked, they didn't just copy it, they improved it. They observed how these people's allied or enemy used the dogs, studied the breeding and training techniques, and began to adapt everything to the Roman military style. It wasn't just putting the dog to attack, it was transforming the dog into an extension of the legion, obeying commands, integrating itself into defense and attack strategies, as if it were another soldier, only on 4 legs. This territorial expansion, full of wars, challenges, and new cultures, accelerated the transformation of the dogs of Rome. What was once just a domestic or hunting animal has become a valuable piece in military campaigns, guarding camps, intimidating enemies, and even saving lives on the battlefield. Thus, the story of Canis Pugnax is directly intertwined with the story of Rome's rise itself. Where the soldiers went, these dogs went too, ready to fight, protect, and ensure the victory of the Roman eagle. Now that Rome had understood the power of the war dogs, they were not going to settle for just any dog. They wanted something special, something that would carry the indomitable spirit of the legions. This is how the Canis Pugnax took shape. Not as a simple fighting dog, but as a true masterpiece of Roman military breeding. This animal was impressive. From afar, it already drew attention. A large, muscular dog about 60 centimeters tall, that is, at the height of an adult man's thigh. His body was strong, compact, made to withstand violent shocks. And the weight? Somewhere between 40 and 50 kilos of pure strength and endurance. It wasn't just the size that was intimidating. The bark was so deep and powerful that it could chill the blood of anyone who was coming close to the camp. The preferred color for these dogs was black. It was no coincidence. The black, in addition to being imposing, helped the dog camouflage itself in the darkness, making its attacks even more frightening during night patrols or surprise attacks. But what really made Canis Pugnax special wasn't just its brutal looks. It was the set of qualities he carried: unbreakable loyalty, the ability to protect territory like few others, blind obedience to orders, the strength to take down armed men, and at the same time, the intelligence to distinguish friend from enemy in the heat of battle. Rome did not want a wild animal out of control. They wanted a disciplined warrior. Canis Pugnax was shaped to be like this, a dog that acted only when commanded, but that when it received the signal of attack, became a force of nature. Think about it for a moment. In a world where battles were decided hand to hand, where there were no automatic weapons or quick communications, a dog like Canis Pugnax could completely change the pace of combat. An army with these dogs didn't just attack physically, it destroyed the enemy's morale before the fight even began. That's the big difference. The Canis Pugnax wasn't created to be just another weapon. He was, above all, a living symbol of Rome's strength, discipline, and ferocity. If this content is making sense to you so far, do this. Give me a sign. Comment 1 below so I know you're with me on this journey. And remember, YouTube only spreads this knowledge if it has a lot of interaction. If you haven't commented yet, now is the time. I want to see this video full of opinions so that this topic continues to reach more people. Rome had the perfect dog in its hands. The question was, where to use all this strength? And the answer? He came right from the arenas. Roman arenas, such as the famous Colosseum, were not just places to watch gladiators in epic combat. They were also stages of brutal spectacles between men and animals. Lions, leopards, elephants, bears, all brought from distant lands to entertain the crowd. With blood and screams, and of course dogs also had their place at these events. The Canis Pugnax was launched into the arenas to hunt, fight, and impress the public. Sometimes he faced other wild animals. Other times it participated in public executions, being used to capture prisoners or unarmed criminals, all under the watchful eyes of thousands of spectators. But Rome, ever practical, soon saw something deeper there. It wasn't just fun. Those dogs, trained to fight wild beasts and armed men, could have a much more serious application on the battlefield. While entertaining the crowds, the Romans tested, without realizing it, the courage, endurance, and ability of their fighting dogs. It was almost like a training camp disguised as a spectacle. And that's how Canis Pugnax began to leave the arenas to take on a new role, not just as bloody entertainment, but as a real tool of war. Little by little, these dogs became part of the army, guarding camps, intimidating enemies, and, in special cases, entering combat alongside the legionnaires. Rome knew better than anyone else how to turn brute force into military strategy. And with Canis Pugnax, it was no different. If you think that these dogs were treated as simple tools of war, you are very wrong. In Rome, the Canis Pugnax was valued almost like a soldier, and often received better care than many slaves. A dog's success in the arenas or on the battlefield could define the honor and even the financial survival of its owner. Therefore, these animals were fed the best available, trained with patience and protected with zeal. It was common for a valuable dog to have its own rest area, reinforced food, and special attention from trainers. The bond between man and dog was strong, based on respect and trust. A Canis Pugnax who obeyed commands under pressure, who fought to the end, was seen as a true hero. This relationship shows us a more human side of Roman society. A harsh and brutal world, it is true, but where loyalty and courage, even in a dog, were grounds for honor and pride. Turning an ordinary dog into a Roman warrior required much more than courage and strength. The training of the Canis Pugnax was extremely rigorous, almost like that of a soldier. These dogs needed to learn to live among the troops, recognize who was friend and who was enemy, and act only on command. No attacking anyone who came near. They had to identify by armor, clothes, and even smell who belonged to the legion. This required daily coexistence. The dogs ate with the soldiers, rested in the camp, accompanied the marches, and above all, they learned to obey verbal commands with precision. A single word could mean to attack, to stop, or to retreat. Unlike the barbarian dogs, which attacked without control, the Canis Pugnax acted with military discipline. He was trained to wait, observe, and act only at the right time, following the logic of Roman war, strategy over brute force. This ability to understand and obey commands made them much more than living weapons. It made them part of the machinery that moved the legions. In Roman campaigns, the presence of dogs was much more strategic than it seems at first glance. Canis Pugnax wasn't just there to fight, he was a key player in the army's security. As the legionnaires marched dozens of miles a day, crossing plains, forests, and mountains, the dogs followed every step. They guarded the troops' flanks, protected supplies, and most importantly, guarded the camps. And that was vital. During the construction of the castra, the temporary camps, the soldiers were vulnerable. They needed to clear the land, erect tents, build defensive fences. All this in an unknown environment, often surrounded by enemies. The dogs, attentive and ferocious, ensured that any threat was detected quickly. At night, while the legionaries rested, they were on alert, ready to act at the slightest sign of danger. In a world where the slightest distraction could cost a life, Canis Pugnax was literally the first line of defense. Despite all the respect and training that Canis Pugnax received, it is important to understand one thing. It was not always taken directly to the battlefield. In practice, the use of these dogs in open combat was much more restricted than most people think today. That's not to say they weren't important, quite the opposite. But generally, their primary role was to protect the camps, patrol sensitive areas, assist in the capture of fugitives, and intimidate prisoners. They acted as an internal security force, not as shock troops. Roman historians even barely mention battles where dogs fought side by side with legionaries. It is possible that this silence is because the dogs were seen more as behind-the-scenes support, essential, but not protagonists on the battlefield. And there was also a practical reason. In a chaotic fight, surrounded by armed soldiers and complex strategies, a dog, no matter how trained, could become disoriented. Rome based its military success on discipline and absolute control, and using unpredictable animals on a large scale went against that principle. Even so, Canis Pugnax kept its place of honor. Not because of the number of battles he entered, but because of the loyalty, protection, and invisible support he offered to the soldiers every day. Even though the Canis Pugnax was not the protagonist in the great battles, the legacy of these dogs within Roman culture is simply gigantic. In Rome, these animals were more than silent warriors. They were part of the family. They received names, special care, and when they died, they were not left aside as disposable objects. Many were buried with honors, with tombstones engraved with messages of love and respect, as if they were true companions in arms and in life. This deep bond between Romans and dogs reveals something very human in the midst of all the brutality of the time. The ability to recognize loyalty, courage, and love even in beings who did not speak the same language. but who understood what it was like to fight side by side, and the vestiges of that respect survived. Inscriptions, monuments, and even sculptures show that these dogs left marks on the hearts of men who marched, fought, and died under the banner of Rome. Today, centuries later, the spirit of Canis Pugnax lives on, as a symbol of quiet bravery, strength that needs no words, and loyalty that transcends time. So now tell me, do you also feel this special connection between man and dog going through the centuries? Leave your opinion here in the comments, and of course, if this story moved you, leave your like, share it with those who love the story, and subscribe to the channel. Before leaving, click on the video on the screen, because we still have many more amazing stories to discover together. See you there.